You're listening to The White Rabbit, conversations on the art of presenting in a rather noisy world. Your hosts are Matt Krause and Alper Rozanes. Matt helps leaders of international companies speak, write, and present with confidence. Alper is a communications trainer and a startup investor with a diverse portfolio of companies in Barcelona. If you like this podcast, please share it with friends and colleagues. Now, on to Matt and Alper for today's conversation.
Alper, today we have a guest on the podcast, Ömer Gençer. And Ömer is a product manager in the tech space here in Turkey. And actually, he works for a German startup company, but he and his family live in Istanbul. And before we get started, I have a little Ömer anecdote that I want to tell. In one of the first conversations that I had with Ömer about a year ago or so, it was on Zoom. And Ömer and I were talking, and he looks off the camera and he starts talking Chinese. And I thought incredulously, wait, is that Chinese? I speak a little Chinese, which is how I recognized it. And I also don't hear it very often, which is what surprised me. And it turns out that, yes, in fact, it was Chinese. Ömer's wife is from China, and Ömer lived in China for a while. So we had something in common right off the bat. Anyway, before we move on to the main question that we have for you today, Ömer, and just so I don't forget to do this later, tell our listeners, if they want to get in touch with you, how can they do it?
I would be appreciated if they can have a touch of me on LinkedIn, sorry.
Okay.
So Ömer Gençer, and directly I pop up.
Okay.
Would be best way. Or they can get in touch with me via email.
Okay.
ogencer@outlook.com.
Okay. So anyway, Ömer, on to the burning question that we have for you today. We talk a lot here on this podcast about the importance of tailoring your message to your audience. And in your line of work as a product manager, you probably talk to a lot of different people, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes it's the C-suite, sometimes it's the software developers, sometimes it's the end users of the software. So what are some of the important things to look out for when you are tailoring your message to a particular audience?
Sure. First of all, I define what kind of message I want to deliver, because we need to decide the core, what we want to deliver at the end. Then, actually, more than what we deliver, how we deliver might matter more, because okay, I have a thing that, okay, this is a piece of software or the feature, it's gonna work this way. That's the core, that's the message content. But when you deliver to the end user, you need to tweak a little bit. Or when you deliver to C-suites or sales, all the different stakeholders are expecting to hear something different. Obviously, you don't hold a meeting when you group them all together. That's also another case. But
okay.
To me, if it's like we need to prepare some basic slides as clean as possible, then based on our audience, we need to decorate as much as we can. If we are having a meeting with technical team, just a picture or few bullet points are not gonna work.
Okay.
Because they are expecting more detail. You need to know what kind of language they want to hear from you. So like you can use input, output, or you can use some flowchart models, more like the squares or some arrows connecting each other. So this is way better presentation for them, so they can understand and we can have a productive meeting with the technical team. While we're like, if you're having or organizing a meeting for end user, you need to be as plain as possible, because it also depends on who's your end user. But let's say a warehouse from one of my previous experiences. So if the end user, the stuff in the warehouse, you need to be as clear as possible, because this is not only presentation, but it can be a training document for them as well. This is an important part. For the C-suites, it might be a tiny bit different, because while you're doing presentation for them, they also want to see some actions, because for them the most important part is what you deliver, but at the same time, if there is any action connected to that delivery. So, okay, this is delivered. Okay, it's online. When is online? If everything is well. So you need to make some little differences, even in the core messages. You need to add some extras for the core messages so they can have some actionable insights from your presentation. And the last one is sometimes companies, very multinational companies, it's very interesting way is to, instead of like what they're doing meetings, but there are a lot of talks. Sometimes they use presentations to tell some words to each other. Like they fill words or sentences all over the presentation. I am never fond of that one. I want to deliver my message as creative as possible in a simplistic way. But if your company's culture is like that company culture only accepts those sort of presentations, then you might need to go with that version as well.
I have a question. It's an interesting point that you bring up as the corporate culture or the company culture. Do you feel sometimes people can, no, not feel, but do you think sometimes people can feel obligated to use a slide deck or a presentation where it actually was not necessary in the first place?
This is actually depends on how much power you have and how much that organization empowers you. Because if there is a lean management system, even though many companies, they say we are lean, we are all together, it's not how it looks. So you need to work, you need to be in that organization to understand. So sometimes they empower you. Okay, you bring your own style, we want to learn from you. And sometimes they add some constructive feedback and you grow. But sometimes that is not that is not the case. So depends on how much power you have. If you're in your early career or middle career, you might need to follow what company wants you to follow, because you don't have that much power. Either you need to leave, but everyone needs to learn some, improve their experiences and earn some money. So it might not be the viable options. Otherwise, you need to have double life. Since you're keeping that method, you need to always think by yourself which could be better and put that one in place once you have enough power in your next chapter or next position.
Did you have to go through that yourself?
Some part, yes, some part. I think most of the people had to, because you prepare something that you think is enough, but then you realize your manager or upper manager's expectations are different. Even color selections, they like some because they're more experienced than you. Sometimes this is not always the case, but it happens. So you understand how that manager operates, and you just change the color, and that manager is okay. Then you realize I don't need to change whole content, just I can change the color, and that manager is all right. So, if you can give some feedback during this process to this manager, okay, this color or this font or this style is better in a nice way, it is perfect. But sometimes it is very hard to do that.
I can imagine.
Ömer, my question for you is that you have described an incredible amount of individualized tailoring. Picking the colors for the person that you're talking to, picking targeting changing the way that you talk about the subject, even changing things like the vocabulary that you use. So do you find that this degree of tailoring, is this a pretty common skill that pretty much everybody who comes into this industry is going to know or already be thinking in those terms? Or is this just something that they acquire through time?
Definitely something that you acquire through time, but these sort of skills or these kind of requirements are in general, you need to deliver during the early stage or middle stage of your career, because then because there are a lot of expectations that you need to fulfill. When you're in your when you're getting some upper level, senior level in your career, then you have some power to continue with your own model. Then that creation, because any sort of creation costs you time.
Okay.
Any sort of creations, because imagine that there's one file and you create 5 different versions of that file. It takes time. All of them are cost. So once you're in your senior level, you can kind of tweak that one, even use the same template. And while you're in the presentation, you can address differently. You can manage that one, but you also acquire this skill through the time. But about this very detailed level of creation, obviously, if you're a worker bee at your organization, if you ever worked in, I always call multinationals. It doesn't have to be multinationals. It could be large companies as well, where there are a lot of stakeholders. Then you realize that you need to proceed the project. There's a project, and like very in general, no one really want to pay attention to the details why this doesn't move. Everyone wants some progress. So to be able to get some progress at individual level, you need to have confirmation with every stakeholders, and that's why you need to do as much as you can. And then you learn what is the mistake, what is the correct way of doing, and then you bring your own version in your later career.
Okay. So, Alper, that pretty much wraps up my questions for the day. We're coming towards the end of the podcast. Do you have anything that you wanted to chime in with?
Yeah, I want to ask Ömer. I want to pick his brains on one more thing.
Sure.
You now work for a German startup company, right?
Yes.
In your professional experience, do you see a noticeable difference between the way the presentations are made or expected to be made between, say, a multinational company and a startup company?
Yes, but you know, when you call multinational company, it's very it's fragmented. Like, to me, it's funny because if you name it any multinational company, inside of that multinational company, there are divisions, and any divisions are like different brands. Yeah, like you just move one like to other room, and the culture slightly changes in that company. So, but for long story short, you have a template in multinational companies. There are some suggestions, 3-4 suggestions. At least you don't deal with the design stuff, colors and everything is set. You just put your content in there, and you just check some old, because there's a shared documents, you check some old styles, how they manage that, if everyone is happy with that. Unless you really want to have some revolution in the presentation skills, you just continue that one. You focus on the content, which actually I'm not against, because there is a system and you proceed that system unless there is a problem. In startups are chaotic. I need to tell you, it doesn't matter where it's based, because startups, there are a lot of unclarities. There are a lot of potential. When you talk about users or customers, or you don't know if those are potential customers or users, everything mixed up. So you need to be ready to change your presentations 10 times, like maybe 10 times in a day, because your needs, your requirements, your audience target, and your touch within the company itself too much. In multinationals, you talk to maybe 3-4 guys in a day. In startup, maybe 10, maybe even more. So it's way more dynamic until it finds its foot or its culture. There's a lot of trial and error process. So, but especially when people reach up their career at some level, then they can actually deliver value. So this is what I do at my current company. So I learned some stuff, and then I'm trying here. Sometimes it works, sometimes it is not, because we are also learning, we are also evolving. There is, in my position as a product manager, or I believe any other position, there is no like, okay, it's done, it's gonna be like that forever. No, we are always evolving. But now I have a chance to bring those ideas that I've been keeping or I've been learning during my multinational company years. So, this would be better. I couldn't do that because I had to be in the system. Right now I'm out, I can try, and I get a feedback from my managers. If they say, okay, this is good, if I can, and then if they say no, if I can counter, I can convince, I can counter. Otherwise, I change. There's always consensus based. But if anyone wanted to work for startups, they need to be ready to like live outside of their comfort zone. Try as much as things that they have never tried, even though it might sound ridiculous, some ideas, they need to try. They need to see that it doesn't work, because this is the only place you can do.
You can do that, yeah.
All right, Alper, so shall we wrap up for today?
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you very much for joining us on the podcast today, Ömer.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very much for having me.
And we'll talk to you later then.
Thank you for listening to The White Rabbit with Matt Krause and Alper Rozanes. You can subscribe to the podcast on Spotify, iTunes, or through your favorite feed.